Welcome back to the Dune Hippie channel. Today I am working on getting some steering mounted up on this I-beam Chevy project here. I've gotten some swingers tacked up and I've gotten some tie rods and a drag link made. Now I need to pull all this apart so I can throw it on the bench and weld it, but before I do, figured we'll film a little bit and kind of catch you up to date on how I got these here and how I go about setting up my steering swingers on an I-beam project. In the very beginning of the video, you might have seen I was measuring out stuff. I didn't film this side. I think I got the passenger side. But for setting these up, let me get my tape measure out here. What I like to do is I just use a jack and some blocks for my Z height, and then I can move and adjust that. And then it sits there, and then I was able to make up these tabs. I draw that up in CAD. There's a frame bend here, so this tab had to be longer than that one, so I had to figure out the math. I think it was a 1/2 inch. This tab is longer to be able to get my swinger swinging in a perpendicular plane to the frame rails. So I want that thing swinging in the 90-degree plane of the frame rails, if that makes sense to you. So once I kind of have it all sitting up on a block there, what I'll do is, this stuff is all drawn in CAD, so I have everything figured out as far as my geometry and how I want this thing to cycle, and I just got to translate it over to here. So I don't have a frame table. I build off of the ground, so I use jack stands and then make sure the frames each side are level with each other from the ground if you have a square floor, and then I'm able to base everything as far as my CAD drawings off the floor. So for my Z height, these pivots here were set at a specific location. So then I can come in and measure to the center of these holes for this Heim steering and line these up. You want to have a beam steering system that doesn't have bump steer. You want your tie rods and your beam pivots to be in line with each other, so that way they cycle at the same angles and swing. So as this beam goes through the cycle and this drag or this tie rod here, these will cycle together and it'll allow that tire to stay straight through the arc and not have bump steer issues. That's more of a thing probably on, again, more OEM application if you're not doing a full fabricated beam steering and spindle uprights. That's using maybe an OEM spindle and bent tie rods and all that type of stuff. But for what we have, everything is built out, and we just, like I said, we got to translate it over. So that's kind of how I go about doing that. For me, my spread on these needs to be 8.5 inches. So if we throw a tape measure up there and look, we're right on 8.5 inches right there. So that is how I lined those up. Because then that gives you the clearance. This beam now will cycle up and through this beam pivot here and this swinger, and then this drag link actually operates on the front side of the swinger. So the swinger then will go in between, not drag link, tie rod. I get them confused back and forth. You get your drag links are up here connecting your swingers and then to your box, and then your tie rods are down here from your swingers going to your spindle uprights. So anyways, I get them backwards all the time, but that's what I'm talking about. So that is all the steering stuff. That's what I did on the other side then too, to locate that one off of that beam pivot. And then if you kind of get this side shot, you see how everything then ends up all equally spaced apart from the beam pivots If you remember back, if you watched my video on finding my frame center, and then I set my beam pivots offset, the same distance, offset, one behind the center and then one in positive. So that way then that sets your whole offset up, and then using my beam pivots is then how I locate my swingers. So then for the Z travel, I just, let's see if I can get my tape measure back in here. Go off the ground and then use a jack to get the number. I think I was 20 inches is what I think I remember that setting that up as. Now that the swingers are mounted and I've got those tie rods and that drag link made, the next thing I'll be able to do is get this steering box fitted up in there and mounted. This box is a GM box. It's just an OEM rebuilt Riemann box. It is out of specifically a 72 Chevelle. There's out of a lot of other things, but that's just what I use when I look these things up and buy them. The reason I use a car box is because these are inside the frame. On all the old 70s, 80s Chevy stuff, the trucks use an outside the frame box, so they mount up out here, and a lot of the cars, muscle cars, used an inside frame box. And the internals are the same, it's just a matter of if they were mounted inside or outside. So for me and how I set my beams up, I like to set these things up on the inside of the frame. And if you look over here, you'll see our other swinger over there with a spot for the other drag link to come over and across and attach to the pitman arm. This pitman arm, I only use the splines out of it. I'll end up cutting this end off of it and then making it a double shear for a heim to go in, so the end will end up looking like that. But that will go on there, and then the box will get mounted up on the inside of this frame here, and we'll get that pitman arm, the end for the heim, to be somewhere in here, have a nice straight shot across. We'll just have to worry about the tie rod here, and that's why I like to do mounting my steering in this order. Get my swingers on there first, build these, and then I do the gearbox placement last, because then I'll be able to get this jacked up in there and get it all in position to make sure I'm going to clearance that tie rod on the cycle. So that's kind of why I need to get that stuff welded all up next. I got to make a cover plate for this. I'll have to come in here and weld these and then put a top gusset on there. So we'll take all that stuff off, get everything welded up, and then I'll be able to do that. We'll get more into that when I actually get to it, kind of showing how I mount the gearboxes and what I do. So for now, we'll get busy back working and pulling this stuff off and doing some more welding. The swingers are now fully mounted. The pivots here are welded in. The gussets on top there are fully welded in. Got both sides done. And also got the tie rods and the one drag link for the steering swingers all welded up. So those are all binding back in there with some bolts, and we are up to the point of needing to mount the gearbox and pitman arm, and then building that last drag link to kind of finish off the steering. You can see I can cycle everything now. See how that all cycles in there together. If I come over from the side view, you can see everything, how it kind of swings. We'll see if I can do this one-handed and cycle that beam up in there like that. So yeah, kind of give you the idea kind of how to mount up steering swingers and lay out the tie rods and drag links. Something I didn't cover earlier on that was material that I'm using for all of my drag links on my I-beam kits. I use 7/8 heims, so all of the heims that are going into the knuckle and then that are going into the steering swingers, those are all 7/8. And then the tube that I'm using is 1.5 inch outer diameter by 1/4 wall, so it has a 1-inch ID, and that is some DOM steel tubing. So that is what I'm building all of those out of, and I think that's it. We're gonna get started on the gearbox and pitman arm on another episode. So for mounting that and then building a pitman arm, we'll kind of do that on the next one. Thanks, as always, for watching my YouTube channel and coming and checking out what I got. And we're getting pretty close to having this I-beam kit and steering all done up on this. So another couple episodes or so on this one, and this one will be wrapped up. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.